The concept of Python modules is an important concept for code reusability. So modules are files of Python code that contains things like functions and classes and variables. They generally have names that end in .py. And in order to use a module in a different file, you would use an import statement. So here we have an example of importing math, which is a part of what's called the Python standard library, which provides additional functionality to the base language that's commonly used. So math, for example, contains a function called math.cos. Really, within math, it's just called cosine, COS. But in our file, we would use math.cos. And it also contains things like math.pi. So that would be the value of pi. Now you can also give a particular name that you choose when you import a module into your script. So for example, we could import math as m, and then whenever we want to use something like math.pi, we would just do m.pi instead. So for example, we have Euler's constant is just m.e now. We can also import particular things from a module. So we can do from math import sine and pi, and then we can just use sine and pi directly. And we could also just import everything with an asterisk, but you should almost never do that because you run the risk of overriding something that you expected has different functionality or having conflicts between different modules. So having these separate namespaces is a decent way of doing things. There are some very popular packages like numpy where this is a very common construct, like import numpy as np is a very common way of doing things just to shorten text. And this is how you load different Python modules. Now Python will look for these on your path. So it will look on sys.path. And you can also augment this with the Python path environment variable. So we can look at where Python's looking for my libraries here, my packages, my modules really, by running this code here, which is looking in sys.path. And so these are all of the locations it's searching. Now the Python standard library contains a whole bunch of modules that are very useful and that lots of people use. So you're not going to find something like some specialized astronomy code or something in this Python standard library, but there are a lot of useful functions that are not a part of the base language. So for example, you can get a list of command line arguments, you can manipulate file names and other things at the operating system level, you can deal with time and dates. There's some math, as we've seen, things like constants and very common functions. Strings and randomness are also part of the Python standard library. And then, of course, there is one of the most powerful things about Python, which is its extensibility. So, for example, the Python package index, or PyPI, PyPI, has a whole bunch of different projects. So there's more than 600,000 projects with more than 13 million files. And so you can find a whole bunch of different projects that you might want to use in your own project. So for example, let's look for, I don't know, an email program. There's a whole bunch of different things, 38 pages of them. And so you can probably find something that someone has written that will do what you want it to do, so you don't have to write it from scratch. Now, if you want to see which modules are available to you, you can run help on modules, the string modules. Now, this brings up an important point, which is that you can have a .py file that you would run as a script, say by just running Python, the interpreter Python, and then the script name. But what if you also want to have that be something you can import into a different script? You can actually have it both ways in Python. And the way you do this is by exploiting this variable underscore underscore name underscore underscore. And when this is run as a script when you, for example, say python myscript.py. This variable will be set to the value, a string, underscore underscore main underscore underscore. Now, if you just import it, so if you have some other script that you say import my script, then this name variable will be different, and so this code will never run. So this is a very common construct of doing if name equals main, then run some tests or otherwise. And then you can have all of your function definitions and some classes, which we'll get into later, and maybe even some variables like math.pi or math.e. And you can use those in other scripts, in other Python files, without having all of the test code or otherwise whatever code you don't want to run in that case along with it.